Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep into a really comprehensive source you shared with us, this primer called The World of Cryptocurrency.
Right. It's quite detailed.
Yeah, and our mission here is, well, pretty straightforward.
Mm.
Cut through it all, pull out the absolute must-know bits, and basically give you a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed about crypto.
Focusing on those maybe surprising facts or key insights that really help it all click.
Exactly. So where does the primer start?
Yeah.
Right at the definition, the core idea. It calls cryptocurrency digital or virtual money.
Mm-hmm.
And the key thing right away is how it uses cryptography for security. That makes it super hard to counterfeit or, spend the same money twice.
And that security aspect immediately separates it from, say, the dollar or the euro traditional fiat currency. The primer really hammers home the decentralization point.
Ah, right.
Yeah, it's not controlled by a single bank or government. It's all managed by this distributed network of computers. That's a huge difference.
That lack of central control, it's definitely a recurring theme, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And the primer takes us right back to the beginning, to Bitcoin.
The OG.
The first one, yeah. Introduced in that now pretty famous 2008 white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto, and it went live in 2009.
Born from this idea of a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.
Peer-to-peer, meaning direct transactions between users, right? No
Sure.
banks getting in the middle.
Exactly. Cutting out the intermediaries, that really drives the tech. So let's break down some of the nuts and bolts the primer covers. What actually makes up a cryptocurrency? And its security.
Okay.
Well, first, its nature. Purely digital. There are no physical coins, no paper bills. Your ownership is just a record on a digital ledger.
And the crypto part, that's the cryptography, the security foundation.
Mhm.
The primer talks about hashing being crucial here.
Right. Hash.
Taking data, any amount, and squishing it into a fixed-size string of characters. Like a unique digital fingerprint for that data.
A fingerprint, yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's used for security and, really importantly, for linking data together, like blocks in a chain. The primer mentions SHA-256 as a common example.
Okay, SHA-256. Got it.
And this is where I think it gets really interesting, and the primer really stresses this. Public and private keys.
Right, keys are fundamental.
Your private key is like your secret, your password almost, but much more powerful. It gives you access to your crypto, lets you sign off on sending it. It proves you own the funds.
And the primer is crystal clear on this. If you lose that private key, you lose your crypto. Period. It's gone.
Total responsibility on you. Your public key, though, that's different. It's generated from your private key, but it's a one-way street. You can't get the private key back from the public one.
Okay.
And you use that public key to create addresses. Think of it like your bank account number. It's what you give people so they can send crypto to you.
So public key for receiving, private key for sending or controlling.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Precisely. And then you have digital signatures. When you want to send crypto, your wallet uses your private key to create this unique signature just for that transaction.
And that signature proves you authorized it, but without showing your private key to anyone.
Exactly. The network can check the signature is valid using your public key. It's a really clever way to authorize things securely.
Okay, so those are the kind of individual tools. The primer then talks about the big picture technology,
Yeah.
blockchain, the distributed ledger.
Yeah, the foundation. It's built from these things called blocks.
Blocks.
Yep. Blocks are basically just batches of transactions that have been checked and verified. They get a timestamp. And here's the clever bit. The primer highlights each block is cryptographically linked to the one that came right before it.
Oh, using that hash thing again.
Exactly. The hash of the previous block is included inside the data of the current block.
Okay, so chaining them together like that, it creates a really strong link. If you mess with an old block, its hash would change.
Precisely. And because that hash is baked into the next block, that next block's hash would change too, and so on, like dominoes all the way up the chain.
So any tampering becomes instantly obvious to everyone on the network.
Right. Which leads straight into decentralization. That ledger, that chain of blocks, isn't stored in one place. It's copied and spread across, potentially thousands of computers nodes all over the world.
Making it super resilient.
Mm.
No single point of failure. No one entity can just shut it down or censor things easily.
Exactly. And that combination of chaining and decentralization gives you immutability.
Yeah.
Once a transaction is confirmed in a block and that block is added to the chain, the primer says it's practically impossible to change or delete it.
Wow, okay. Immutable.
And there's this interesting balance the primer points out between transparency and pseudonymity.
How so?
Well, on public blockchains like Bitcoins, the transaction history is transparent. Anyone can look at the ledger and see address A sent X amount to address B.
Okay, so it's all public.
The transactions are, yes, but the identities behind address A and address B are pseudonymous. You see the address, but you don't automatically know who owns it unless they link it to their real identity somehow.
Right, okay. It's open, but not necessarily revealing who's who.
Exactly. It's a fascinating dynamic.
So how does a transaction actually, happen? From me wanting to send crypto to it being locked into that immutable chain. The primer walks through the steps.
Right. First, you, the sender, use your wallet software, and crucially, your private key to authorize and digitally sign the transaction details, who you're sending to, how much.
Signed it with my secret key. Then what?
That signed transaction gets broadcast out to the network. All the participating computers, the nodes, see it.
And they check it.
Yep. They verify the digital signature using your public key, and they check their copy of the ledger to make sure you actually have the funds you're trying to send.
Makes sense.
If it looks valid, the transaction goes into this waiting area, often called the mempool, just a pool of valid but not yet confirmed transactions.
Okay, it's waiting to get picked up.
Exactly. Then network participants, the primer calls them miners or validators, depending on the system they select transactions from that mempool to bundle into a new block they're trying to build.
Trying to add the next link to the chain.
Precisely. Once one of them successfully creates a valid block, including your transaction, and gets it accepted onto the end of the blockchain, then your transaction is considered confirmed.
And the primer mentions that the more blocks get added after yours, the more secure it becomes.
Yeah, exactly. Each new block basically buries your transaction deeper into the confirmed history, making it progressively harder and harder, practically impossible to undo.
Okay, so that whole process of adding blocks, that brings us to how new coins sometimes get created, and more fundamentally, how does this decentralized network agree on everything? Like, which transactions are good, which block is next?
Right. That's where consensus mechanisms come in. The primer really highlights why they're needed, because there's no central boss saying this is the official record. The network needs rules to agree.
And the most famous one, the Bitcoin one, is proof of work, POW.
Correct. The primer explains it involves participants, called miners, using a lot of computing power to solve these really complex mathematical puzzles.
Puzzles. What are they solving?
It's basically like a guessing game. They're trying to find a specific random number called a nonce that when you combine it with the data in the block they want to add and run it through that hashing function.
The fingerprint thing again.
Yeah. They need the resulting hash to start with a certain number of zeros, basically meeting a difficulty target set by the network. It's pure trial and error, brute force guessing.
Wow. Okay. So lots of computers guessing really fast.
Extremely fast. The first miner anywhere in the world to find a valid nonce gets to propose their block to be added next. And for their trouble, they get a reward.
Which is?
Typically, newly created cryptocurrency. This is how new Bitcoins are made, plus all the transaction fees from the transactions included in their block.
And the security comes from how much effort this takes.
Exactly. The security of PowW relies on the massive amount of computational work, and therefore electricity needed to solve that puzzle. It makes it incredibly expensive for any one person or group to try and cheat the system or take over.
Right. And the primer does call out the big downside there.
Yeah.
The significant energy consumption of PowW and the environmental concerns tied to it. That's a major point of discussion.
Definitely. Which leads to the alternative the primer discusses, proof of stake, or POS.
Okay, how's that different?
Instead of miners using computing power, you have validators who lock up or stake their own crypto as collateral. They put skin in the game.
Skin in the game? Okay.
Then the network chooses validators to create the next block. The choice might depend on how much they've staked, maybe how long they've staked it. Sometimes there's an element of randomness, too.
So no massive energy-guzzling puzzle solving.
Generally, no. The security comes from the fact that validators have their own money locked up. If they try to cheat or approve bad transactions, the network can automatically punish them by taking away some or all of their staked coins. That's called slashing.
Ouch. So there's a direct financial incentive to play fair.
Exactly. And the primer notes POS is usually way more energy efficient than PowW. It also mentions that, PowW and PowSS aren't the only games in town. Other consensus methods exist too.
Okay, interesting. So if we pull all this together, based on the primer, what are the absolute key characteristics and features we need to remember?
Right, let's recap first. That core idea, decentralization. No single boss, open access for anyone to participate, usually.
Security coming from the cryptography and the distributed network agreement.
Transparency of the public ledger, but balanced with that pseudonymity of the addresses. You see the what, not necessarily the who.
Limited supply for many cryptos, like Bitcoin's 21 million cap. That program scarcity is a big deal.
Yep, global accessibility, basically. If you have internet, you can potentially participate.
Potentially lower transaction costs, especially for international stuff, though the primer does warn fees can spike when the network gets busy.
Definitely. Irreversibility is another. Once confirmed, transactions are generally final. Good for certainty, risky if you make a mistake or get scammed.
No chargebacks like a credit card.
Exactly. And finally, divisibility. You can break most cryptos down into tiny fractions, like Bitcoin's Satoshis, useful for small payments.
Okay, that covers the what. The primer then talks about the different types of cryptocurrencies out there. Starts with Bitcoin, obviously.
The first mover, often seen now as maybe digital gold, a store of value, more than everyday cash for coffee.
Then you have altcoins.
Yeah, basically everything else that isn't Bitcoin. The primer mentions Litecoin, which aimed to be faster than Bitcoin for transactions, and Ethereum, which was huge because it introduced smart contracts.
Smart contracts.
Right.
Like a code that runs automatically on the blockchain.
Exactly. Code that executes predefined actions when certain conditions are met. That opened the door for way more complex applications beyond just sending money, things like DeFi. The primer also nods to others like Ripple and Cardano, which have their own unique designs and goals.
And then there's another important category mentioned, stablecoins.
Right. These are designed to tackle that wild price volatility you see in Bitcoin or many altcoins. They try to keep a stable value by being pegged, usually, to something like the US dollar.
So one stablecoin might always aim to be worth $1.
Pretty much. USDC and USDT are big examples the primer gives. Or they could be pegged to other things, like commodities. The whole point is less volatility, making them potentially more useful for payments or holding value short-term within the crypto ecosystem.
Okay. Now, how do you actually hold and manage this stuff? The primer talks about wallets.
Yes, and it clarifies something important. Wallets don't physically store the coins themselves. The coins are just records on the blockchain.
So what does the wallet hold?
Your keys, specifically that all-important private key. The wallet is the tool you use to manage your keys and interact with the blockchain check balances, sign transactions.
And the primer breaks down different wallet types.
Yep. It distinguishes hot wallets, those connected to the internet, like apps on your phone or computer, or wallets on exchanges. They're convenient for quick access.
But riskier.
Generally, yes, because they're online. They're more exposed to hacking, malware, phishing attacks.
Okay, so the alternative is cold wallets.
Right. These are kept offline, much more secure, especially for storing larger amounts or for long periods, but less convenient if you want to transact frequently. Hardware wallets, little physical devices, are a popular type of cold storage mentioned.
And there's another split. Custodial versus non-custodial.
Crucial distinction. Custodial means someone else, usually an exchange or a third-party service, holds your private keys for you. It's simpler, like using a regular online bank.
You're trusting them, right? If they get hacked or go bust.
Exactly. You have counterparty risk. Non-custodial means you hold your own private keys. You have full control. This is the be your own bank idea.
But also full responsibility. Lose your keys, nobody can help you.
Precisely. The primer really emphasizes, if you go non-custodial, securing those keys properly is absolutely paramount. Write them down safely, keep them offline, don't share them.
Makes sense. So beyond just holding or trading, what are people actually using crypto for? The primer lists several use cases.
Yeah, it covers a range. It can be a medium of exchange, actually buying stuff, though maybe not as widespread as hoped yet for some coins.
Store value, like we said, the digital gold argument for Bitcoin.
Investment and speculation is obviously a huge one. Financial inclusion is another potential benefit, giving people without access to traditional banks a way into financial services.
That seems significant.
It could be. Then there's decentralized finance, DeFi. This is a big area. Building things like lending, borrowing, trading systems directly on blockchains, often using those smart contracts we mentioned, cutting out traditional financial middlemen.
Interesting. What else?
Web3 gets a mention, this broader vision of a more decentralized internet where users own their data and online identity more directly. And remittances using crypto to send money across borders, potentially faster and cheaper than old methods.
So, looking at all those use cases, the primer seems to suggest crypto has the potential to really shake things up in finance and maybe even the internet itself.
Yeah, that's the underlying message. It presents this potential for fundamental change.
But it's not all smooth sailing. The primer is also very clear about the risks and challenges involved.
Absolutely. Top of the list for many is volatility. Prices can swing wildly, very quickly. Huge gains, but also huge losses are possible.
And security risks for users themselves seem like a big concern, too.
Definitely. The primer mentions scams, phishing attempts trying to trick you out of your keys or coins, malware designed to steal crypto, and also the risk that exchanges themselves can get hacked if you leave your crypto there. You need to be really careful.
What about the rules?
Regulatory uncertainty is a major challenge flagged in the primer. Laws and regulations are still being figured out around the world, and they differ a lot from place to place. That creates uncertainty for users and businesses.
And the tech itself isn't perfect yet?
No, scalability issues are mentioned. Some blockchains can get slow and expensive to use when lots of people are trying to make transactions at once. High fees, delays.
Though the primer does note things like Layer 2 solutions like Bitcoin's Lightning Network are being developed to try and fix that.
Right, trying to make it faster and cheaper off the main chain. And, circling back, those environmental concerns, especially around proof-of-work's energy use, are still a significant challenge, the primer notes.
Illicit use, does it cover that?
It does. It acknowledges that crypto is used for illicit purposes, but it also states that perspective is needed. The proportion is often claimed to be overstated, and the transparency of public blockchains can actually help track criminal funds sometimes.
Okay. And finally, it's complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, complexity is the last big challenge listed. There's a steep learning curve for newcomers. Understanding the tech, managing keys safely, navigating the different coins and platforms, it takes effort.
So wrapping it all up, what's the primer's final verdict? What does all this mean?
It concludes by saying cryptocurrency isn't just, new money. It represents a potential paradigm shift in how we even think about money and financial systems.
A whole new way of doing things.
Potentially. It offers this decentralized digital-first alternative, but it comes with both, significant potential and some really notable challenges that still need to be worked through.
It's definitely a complex picture. The primer covers a huge amount of ground to build that understanding. So, given everything we've dug into here, this world of immutable, transparent ledgers, but with pseudonymous actors, all decentralized, here's something for you, our listener, to chew on. How do you see the future of privacy and accountability actually intersecting within this evolving cryptocurrency space?